since 2018, and it ended up being one of my passions. Specifically now, feeding for autistic children is something I am happy to share education on. It all started when I did a literature search, looking for what are the best guidelines for parents and professionals when addressing this area, and there's not a lot of information out there. So there's a huge need for this, and it really got me thinking of how do we challenge some of our views about eating and feeding and what's going to be best for an autistic child. This presentation is going to focus on kids 0 through 5 because their motivations are a lot different than an older kiddo. Um, so this has been a project of mine for a while. I have trained therapists in Mexico on how to view feeding in a different lens, how to look at considerations of autism, and kind of the goal for all of this is just to reduce stress for parents and give themselves more compassion while thinking of strategies on how to increase variety in diet. So today we are going to focus on these goals of understanding the different factors associated with autism that may impact feeding, learn strategies such as food chaining that can be very helpful for both parents and professionals. We're going to identify some common societal and cultural expectations that may conflict with the needs of a child. And then we're going to learn how to prevent common issues such as food jagging, and support positive mealtime experiences. How we are going to do this is I'm going to do an overview of feeding. We're going to look at some of the common feeding concerns associated with autism. We are going to look at the impacts and dive into some considerations, look at specific strategies, and then I have a case study for you guys. And then at the end, we're going to wrap it all up and answer some questions that you guys have. So before we even start looking at feeding, I really want to start looking at a lens of autism in a different light. And this is the way that I address feeding is a very neurodiverse affirming approach in recognizing the individual as young as they are as their own unique person. Temple Grandin is a self-advocate for autism, and she really talks about some of the sensory difficulties that she's experienced and some of the processing that goes on in her brain. And a quote that she has given is different but not less. So yes, people with autism experience the world differently, but it doesn't mean that they're less than anybody else. It's not a deficit that we need to really fix. So we can acknowledge their differences without trying to change somebody. Another one is Dina Gassner. She's a researcher and she has quoted, "You don't outgrow autism, you grow into it." So this really highlights the strengths-based approach. Autism just doesn't go away. The challenges may fade, but it doesn't just disappear with therapies. What we really want for autistic children is to grow into it, have self-advocacy, know about themselves, know about their strengths, areas improvement, just like we want any other human being to do too. I love this one is the face of autism is changing, and more often than we realize, the face is wearing lipstick. This one's a little bit, have to know a little bit of context, but autism for boys and girls really often present differently, and sometimes it's misdiagnosed. A lot of the time, females mask, so they try to fit into society by pretending to be someone that they're not, and it's really exhausting. And so masking is something that I try not to do in a lot of my interventions. I don't want someone to comply. I want them to be themselves. whether they're a boy or a girl, we're going to acknowledge them all the same. Oh, this one's my favorite. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Like every human being, everybody is unique. So we can't really like clump everybody together. You'll notice that in this presentation, there's not going to be one golden standard of this is what you should try. It's going to be more, how do I think about this differently? And what are some strategies I can use that is going to work with my kiddo or the kiddo that I'm working with? So it's going to be very unique. We can't just try one thing and hope that it's going to be the thing that solves it all, because one person is just one person with autism. And then the last one, without deviation from the norm, progress is not possible. And in the grand scheme of the world of autism, it's a relatively new diagnosis. A lot more information is coming out. We don't have all the knowledge yet. So if we really want to be progressive and we want to acknowledge these lived experience of these children, no matter the age, we kind of have to deviate from the norm and challenge our current beliefs. So let's dive into feeding. Oh, first, I want you to think to yourself, and you can write in the chat if you want, you don't have to. What was the best meal that you have ever had? Where were you? Who was with you? What did you really like about it? So taking like the next 10 seconds to think about that. Everything, be as specific as possible, all the details. So one of my favorite meals is rooted in tradition. On Sundays, I like to make a new soup for the week, and I invite people over, and it's just all about connection for me. This is one of the best meals that I ever had, and I want to remind us that it's not always just about the food. It wasn't the best food that I've had. It's about the other contexts that come into feeding that we don't always think about. So feeding is more than just eating. Yes, it does provide us nutrition. Yes, it does provide us energy and enjoyment. I'm a snacker. I like to eat when I'm bored. But there's also so many different things in feeding, like the social impacts, the family traditions that are within food, cultural traditions of like delicacies around food, sharing experiences, bonding, and it fills a need both within our nutritional needs and sometimes societal needs. Okay, within that, feeding is so complex. It's not just about what we put into our mouth and chew and swallow. Feeding is one of the only things that we do that requires all 8 sensory systems. And you're like, whoa, 8, I only know about the 5. The traditional ones that we think about are taste, that really goes in hand with eating, smell, how food smell impacts the taste and our ability to try it, sound. It's really interesting because not a lot of people think about this, but the way that food is chewed in our mouth creates a specific sound. So like crunchy foods are going to be louder. I can hear the sloshing in my mouth when I eat yogurt. There's also like the sound of a fork against a plate. And whenever I hear that, I just like shudder and I have to like recuperate. So there's so many sounds that go into eating. Hearing somebody else eat if we're eating with other people. There's also the sense of touch, specifically like textures and how our mouth is interpreting the sense of touch in our mouth. And then visual, how does a food look? I'm someone where like they kind of have to be separate. If they're all mixed together, I'm not going to be willing to eat it. And so people say we eat with our eyes. The other senses that we also need to be aware of are proprioception, which is where our body is in space. So thinking, can I, like if we close our eyes, could you bring your hand to your mouth? And if you are holding a utensil, could you do that with your eyes closed? Or do you know that your body's upright? So where is our body in space? Do we know where our hands are? Do we know where our mouth is? And kiddos are still kind of learning that around that age of 0 to 5. Um, the vestibular is our sense of balance. And does our body know that we're sitting upright to process everything going down? And lastly is interoception, is recognizing our hunger cues, our thirst cues, our cues to go to the bathroom, all of the signals that our body is sending. Can we interpret that? Feeding is also a whole body effort. It is more than just chewing and swallowing. It requires at least 7 functions of the body. So thinking of, okay, we chew, you have to be able to use your tongue and move it side to side to move the food around. You need to be able to open and close your jaw to chew it. Your systems also need to use the reflexes to close your epiglottis when you're swallowing so you don't choke. You also need to know how to breathe when you're eating, how the food is digesting in your stomach, how it eliminates through your body. There's so much more than just putting it in and swallowing. And since it's such a complex thing, we're asking people to do it so many times a day. For kids, it could range between 4 to 11 times, depending on the age. It could be more. If I'm in a snacking mood, I could eat like 15 times a day. So when it's really hard and you're asking someone to do it a lot, we might get more behaviors. It's also essential, which can cause more stress. Feeding is essential to get nutrients for growth and development. And if a kid's not meeting that, it can be really stressful because it's one of the things we have to do. We have to eat. Feeding is both a learned skill and it's something that we're born with. It's innate. So some feeding skills are reflexive, like swallowing, and you don't really think about it that much. But when we're young, feeding skills are very much learned. How we eat and try new foods is a learned behaviors. How we manipulate textures is a learned behavior. The SOS approach to feeding is a systematic way of looking at textures. And it also teaches us that it is learned. Harder textures are a learned thing. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested. I don't own the rights to it, but the SOS approach to feeding is very helpful of looking at like, oh, these are learned skills. It's not just something that can come really easily for a lot of people. There are social and emotional implications for feeding. So it's not just the individual, there's family. If meal times are stressful, it impacts the whole family. And then thinking of when a kid grows up, it could be an emotional experience of I can't eat a lot of the things my family is eating, or I really don't like what my peers are doing. And so it's such a broad thing. And because we do it so often, we forget how complex it really is.
So, Emily, just really
Yes.
quick, to your question that you asked a few minutes ago about what is the best meal you have ever had, we've had a number of responses come through,
Uh-huh. Ooh.
and some of them were related to meal times with family, other foods. A few of them were pizza,
Ooh.
um,
Uh-huh.
sopa de pollo. I don't know if I said that right. Mac and cheese was my comfort food, talking
Mm-hmm.
about the emotional impact that food brings and how we turn to food for comfort sometimes. Soup made from mom and fresh made tortillas, soup in the fall. And this goes to the family and the role of family and ceremony around food. Dim sum with the wife and our 2-year-old son.
Yeah, there's so much connection that we have in food. So it can make it even more stressful when it's like my child's not eating what I really enjoy eating too. So we kind of have to break it down and zoom out a little bit to see like what are the challenges, what's important to the family as a whole, and we're gonna dive into that a little bit more. So
Oh, and
I'm,
chicken nuggets,
ooh, yeah,
of
I had those
course.
earlier today.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay. So this is from that SOS approach to feeding. This is by Dr. K.A. Toomey. It is called I Am I at Your Table? And these are just some of the few challenges that like can make meal times hard where the child is not at the table with me. So thinking of I choke or I gag or cough at during meals. I eat less than 20 different foods. Meal times are stressful. I eat meals separate from the rest of the family. I stopped eating foods that I liked. I weigh less than other kids. It's hard for me to eat in a variety of settings. I've been described as a picky eater. I have brand specific preferences. I cry. And so there's so many challenges that can come out, and it's something that we expect, or yeah, we expect children to do it all the time, but it could be a really challenging task. So thinking, is my kid at the table? Are they here with me? Are they meeting the needs that feeding has? So common concerns that I see with autistic children is my child can't progress past bottle or chest or breastfeeding. My child doesn't use utensils. My child will only eat very specific foods, specific brands, will reject any new packaging. My child will refuse to eat anything new. Um, they only eat processed foods. They don't eat fruits or vegetables. Meal times are hard. They'll scream, cry, leave the table. They'll even like throw the food sometimes. And then my child is losing foods that they once used to eat. And this is a concept called food jagging, and we'll dive into it in a different slide more later. So, how does autism impact feeding? While it's not part of the diagnosis, many kids have sensory processing differences, which can mean that they are more heightened to sensory input coming in, and they could be like super sensitive, like, wow, that is too intense for me. Some kids will try to avoid sensations. Some kids might try to seek it out more, where they need more spices and things in their food. So the way that the information from environment is coming in, being processed in their mind, can be different than a neurotypical person. So as we know, feeding is so sensory. If there's sensory processing differences, it could make feeding challenging. There's also a preference for routines and rituals, and like this desire for sameness. So going back to processed foods, a lot of those foods are the same every single time. When it comes out of the box, it's the same recipe made at the same manufacturer. It makes sense that they're going to want something where they know how it's going to taste. They know what to expect, the sounds, the texture, the whole everything about the food. They know what to expect because the chicken nuggets taste the same out of the box every single time. So thinking of it, it's not that they are refusing and are not willing to try. It's like, no, they have this preference for sameness because they can predict what's going to happen. That goes along with our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight. So, looking at this picture on the right, this is guacamole with crickets. And I had this when I was in Mexico training those therapists. And this is something that I don't typically eat. When I first saw it, my fight or flight was activated. I felt anxious. I didn't know how it was going to taste. I didn't know what the texture was going to be like. Would it be I just like didn't know. I love guacamole. I like tomatoes. I like cilantro. I've never had crickets before. So it really like activated my nervous system. Even though I didn't think this was a real danger, my body still perceived it because it didn't know. So thinking of that with our kiddos, when they're under 5, a lot of these foods are very new. They don't have experience unless we introduce it to them. So they kind of have to figure out for themselves, and a lot of the times their nervous system is activated of, I don't know what to do. I could fight or flight it, and fighting would be screaming, crying, and flight would be refusing it altogether. Another impact is motor coordination and planning. So this is how the brain is communicating to our motor outputs, how I'm using my body. sometimes there's a disconnect and it takes longer to process things and it takes longer to plan. So, can I plan to use and hold the utensil and use that tool to scoop the food and bring it to my mouth? That's hard. Also, with textures, thinking of like a soup. Say we have a chicken noodle soup, there's chicken, noodles, vegetables, and a broth. That is a food that has so many textures in it, and our mouth needs to coordinate. How are we going to swallow the liquid and chew the foods? In all of that, there's so many things, moving my tongue, moving my jaw, making sure I don't choke. Um, if that planning is kind of impaired, if I see a new food and I don't know how to eat it, I'm not going to eat it. It's too nervous. My system, my sympathetic nervous system is activated because I don't know how to do it. So I'm going to avoid. Another impact is black and white thinking, which is it's that all or nothing mentality. And I really wanted to include this here because a lot of times, if a kid is willing to try a food, they will categorize it into I like it or I don't like it. And they're kind of quick to do that. I will eat it or I will never eat it again. So we really kind of have to think of, okay, problem solving. What can we do if we don't like it? Or can we even tolerate it versus like or don't like? Um, and a fun fact here too is that it can take up to 10 times to try something for our brain to determine if we like it or not. So think of when you ate something new, like a new spice or a new texture, and you're like, I don't know how I feel about that. Let me take another bite. And sometimes it could take up to 10 times. So if we think about that, and a kid is quick to say, I like it, I don't like it, they're going to reject a lot of foods because their brain is still processing. It's like, this is new. I don't know where to categorize this. So this is where we really have to help kiddos reduce their anxiety about food and help them think less of yes or no. Another or other considerations, and we won't go too deep, is that interoception of identifying our body cues. If I can't identify when I'm hungry or thirsty or need to go to the bathroom, or if I'm constipated, I'm not gonna want to eat. It's hard to eat when you're not hungry, and it's hard to eat when you don't feel good. So if you can't identify any of those things, it's gonna make it a lot harder. Another one is the brain gut connection. Our gut has a lot of bacteria in it, good and bad. And our gut also produces hormones for our brain, and our brain also does stuff for our gut. So there's this huge connection. A lot of the time, there's a disconnect for kids with autism, and there's a lot of constipation in kids with autism. We're not sure with the research quite yet, but that's just something we got to consider. If we also don't if our gut doesn't feel good, we're not going to want to try new foods. We also have to look at how a kid can communicate. Can they communicate their preferences? Can they say that they want to try it or they don't want to try it? All behavior is communication. So, crying, screaming, yelling, throwing things, fighting it is telling me that they're not ready to try it. So, why push it? Also, thinking, can a kid communicate like if they're hungry, if they're thirsty? Back to those interoception cues. Some kids around this age are still learning how to communicate verbally. Some will use an AAC device like a tablet and push the buttons. So they're also still learning how to communicate, and they're also learning their preferences and how to read their cues. They're learning so much at this time. So no wonder why it's so hard sometimes. And then we won't dive too much into it though, but we also have to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for those who don't know, it's kind of the baseline needs need to be met before we can grow and grow and grow and develop these higher skills. And a good example of this is I was working with a 5-year-old, and we were just coloring, and the demand was to color, and he is screaming and fighting and kicking me and biting me, and I'm like, what is going on? He doesn't normally do this. And in the middle of the tantrum, he like takes a deep breath and he goes, I need a snack. And then while we're eating, he's just like, and he's happy. And then he goes back to coloring. So we can't really learn higher skills unless we're met biologically and physically, which is eating, sleeping, water, all of those basic needs that we have. So it just reiterates why feeding is so important. So, what do I look for as a feeding therapist? I really look for kids who eat a variety of 10 to 20 foods or less. And like, wow, that's a lot of foods sometimes. But if you think about it, spaghetti with sauce would be two different foods. And if we can break pasta down to even more, so if they eat spaghetti noodles, they eat penne, they eat rigatoni, like different shapes, that all counts as a different food because they have different textures, they have different tastes, all of that. So breaking it down into further categories, if they can put cheese on it, that's two different foods. um, if a parent's like, my kid eats beans, do they eat it refried beans, do they eat black beans, do they do beans with cheese? Those are all different foods there. So when I look for a variety, I break it down and see what are the single ingredients that this kid can eat. I also look to see if a kid's avoiding an entire category of food. So if they're not eating any grains, if they're not eating any fruits or any vegetables, any dairy, any protein, that's kind of a big red flag because each group gives us different nutrients. A lot of the times kids won't eat fruits and vegetables, and I kind of expect that too. So going back to processed foods, when you eat it out of a box, everything tastes the same. When you eat fruits and vegetables, that doesn't happen. This morning when I was eating blueberries, not a single blueberry tastes the same. Some were mushy, some were firm, some had seeds in it that I can taste, some were sour, some were sweet. Fruits and vegetables, they change based off of like the day when they're picked, what time of the year it is, where you get it from, what type of species it is, essentially. So if we look back and like, "Ugh, my kid really wants the same thing over and over again, they're not eating fruits and vegetables." We have to remind ourselves, they tried a banana one time, that banana is going to taste different the next day. They can't realistically build these connections of the banana is always going to taste like this. The strawberry is always going to taste like this. The carrot will always taste like this because fruits and vegetables vary day to day, and they vary so much. Food jagging. I look for food jagging, which is when you eat a specific food over and over again, and then you're like, I'm done. I'm never going to eat it again. So they refuse it. Like, why does this happen? You liked it yesterday. That's very common. And the term for that is food jagging. I also look at how does a child interpret their sensory information. This is where an occupational therapist could help you out and provide an assessment. But thinking of, okay, some kids really avoid sensory input. They don't like it when the lights are on. They don't like bright things. Some kids are super sensitive to sensory information coming in, where it's too hot, it's too spicy, the tag is itching me, things like that on like clothes. Some kids are sensory seekers. They're moving their body. They like intense flavors. They usually can't sit still at this age. And then I look how well a kiddo registers their sensory input. So that is like the intensity at which you notice that something is there. I personally am someone that is a low registration. So I need high intensity to notice that, oh, it's actually cold outside. I'm like freezing by the time I even notice it. So our body registers it. Sometimes it avoids input. Sometimes we're super sensitive to input, and sometimes we seek it. So if we're sensitive and we avoid it, that's going to make feeding really hard. I'm also looking to see what the whole context of it is. We know that feeding is not just about the food. So, what is the environment? Where do people sit? Do you guys eat together as a family? Just the kids eat? How are you providing food exposures? So, the whole context, because it's not just about the food, as we know. And then for my professionals out there, the PD Eat by Feeding Flock is a assessment that kind of breaks down and asks caregiver questions through observation too of what type of difficulties are we really experiencing with feeding. Is it physiological? Is it selective eating? Is it mealtime behaviors? And is it oral processing? It could kind of break it down a little bit more so we could find out exactly what's going on, because we need to know what exactly is going on to address the real root, because feeding is so broad. So let's dive into these strategies. I want to go back to this quote. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So there's really no one right way to approach it. It's important to consider, what are your child's strengths? What are their motivations right now? In what context do they live in? So thinking of what is important to the family and what is the environment which this is all existing. And the goal of feeding therapy should be to develop healthy eating skills compared to forcing compliance. And healthy eating skills is a lot of how do we reduce anxiety to trying something new, and build a healthy relationship of food, of being willing to try versus eating everything that's in front of you. We all have our own preferences, and if we force compliance, we're really teaching a child how to mask, how to not know their strengths, how to just comply, and that could provide stress later on in life. So even at 5 years old, we really want to do healthy eating skills. So, a family centered approach is how I view the whole context of eating. And this is probably the most important part. We know that feeding impacts more than just the kids. Parents are stressed, meal times are hard. We just don't know what to do. Parents need to be involved. If you have a therapist that's working on it, it's maybe once a week, right? There are so many meals that happen. So, to just only do it in therapy is not going to be very beneficial. Parents need to be involved and work together. So, to really understand and get what's going on for the family and everybody to create a family goal, we have to consider what is important to the family to eat. What can we realistically afford? If we can't waste food, because if we like, how do we feel about wasting food? um what are strategies around that too? Who is eating with the kid? Is it just the children and then the parents eat 30 minutes later? What is like the whole context? Who is preparing the food? Is the child allowed to help and watch, or are they watching TV while someone's cooking? Are we getting takeout? What's the context of it all? What are the expectations to finish a meal and try things? A lot of cultures and families believe you have to clear the plate. And what sort of values does the family hold, and what's important to them? Because we want to make sure that we're addressing their values and not just like this goes out the window. And also thinking about, what does the family hope to achieve? Sometimes the goals for the family aren't realistic. I would never expect a child to eat everything that's served in front of them. Um, but asking this question straight on gives you a better idea of what are we working with. And so an example of this is, I'm working with a kiddo who has challenges eating at home. We asked a lot of these questions, and it turns out he eats oatmeal for breakfast every single day. And the challenge is that it takes 60 minutes to eat it in the morning. And school starts at 7:30 here. He's not a morning kiddo. So the real challenge is, how do I get my kid a nutritious meal within the 15 minutes that I have to get out the door, right? So it's not about eating the variety. And lo and behold, we changed what he's having for breakfast. Instead of hot oatmeal, we tried overnight oats, and now he eats within 15 minutes, and parents are happy because they're not stressed that he's hungry at school. And that's not going to be consistent with every family. So we really have to ask, what do you hope to achieve? So, talking about food jagging, this is founded by Dr. K.A. Toomey in the SOS approach to feeding. And specifically, food jagging is the preference to eat the same food prepared the same way every day or at every meal. And eventually, we do get bored of it and then we burn out. And then we never want to eat that food ever again because we just got so bored of it. It may make us sick, or we're like, oh, I don't want to eat that over again. So, thinking of if you ate eggs every single morning, every single day, eventually you'll get bored of it. And you're like, oh, I'm disgusted by it. And this can be really stressful because if you already have a little amount of foods and these are your safe foods, and then they suddenly just go away and you can't eat them again, then there's less foods to keep going in. It's so stressful. So one thing that we could do about it is food chaining. And food chaining was developed by Sherry Frocker in her book Food Chaining. And it's a strategy that starts with a preferred food, and we're going to make small, gradual changes that are tolerated to maybe one of the sensory properties to work towards a goal food. So, down here, say the kid eats goldfish cheddar crackers and they want to eat that all the time and they're not eating anything new, but we really want them to eat a meal or something. To go from goldfish to straight to a quesadilla, even though they're cheesy, is too big of a jump. We're talking about different textures, we're talking about different smells, different looks, so many changes. Yes, it could be cheesy related, but if I was a kid and you're asking me to now eat a quesadilla when I've only eaten goldfish, I'm going to be anxious about it. This is something totally new. I might reject it. So we need to make small changes, realistic ones that could help progress towards there instead of making this huge jump. So maybe going from cheddar goldfish to rainbow goldfish. They have the same texture, the same taste. They just look different. That's the only thing. And then maybe from the goldfish, we try Cheez-Its because it's the same texture, similar taste, but it looks different too. And maybe Cheez-Its, we try club crackers that have the cheesy filling, like cheddar sandwich crackers. And then from there, we could go from to other crackers with cheese and maybe a grilled cheese and then maybe a quesadilla and then with salsa or guac or however we can keep progressing. But the goal here is to make just subtle, small changes that the kid might tolerate to progress to something new without it feeling super overwhelming. Other ways we can make small changes, and especially if you're like, well, my kid won't eat anything new like that, like they won't go from cheddar goldfish to rainbow goldfish, that's too big of a jump. There are still other ways to make small changes. So we can change the shape of a food. We can cut a sandwich into with cookie cutters to make it a different shape. That technically kind of is a new food in the way that their information of I see it, this looks different, it's going to help us not jag as often. We can change the color of the food with food. What is it? Food dye. I have a fun story about color that I'll share after this slide. We can change the taste. We can add sauces if they like sauces. We can add cinnamon to things. We could smash a banana into something, change the flavor that way. And we could change the texture. There's things that make things thicker. We could add water to make things thinner, because if we change the texture, that's a new sensory experience in itself as well. We can also change the presentation. We can make it fun. Instead of serving it the same way every time, we could cut it into smaller bits and just be fun with it. So going back to this color thing, I am working with a kiddo who has symptoms that present very similarly to autism, and he also has challenges seeing. We wrote down all the foods that he liked, and it wasn't anything about texture or that sort of stuff. It was actually, he really only liked orange foods. And I think it's probably because he could see it. So then mom and I talked, we were like, maybe try orange food dye or even adding turmeric to something because it doesn't really change the flavor, it just makes it orange. And now he's eating curries, he's eating mixed texture things. So it was just a visual thing that we had to change for some of the foods to make it and so into his preferences. So a lot of these strategies come from that SOS approach to feeding by Dr. K.A. Toomey. And these links will take you to exactly where I got them from. And the point of food jags and how we stop it from happening is by making these small changes so that they can't get fixated on it and they can't burn out as quickly, because each time we're serving it, it's something a little different. A general rule of thumb is trying not to serve something within the same like 48 hours. So if I serve something on Monday, I'm not going to serve it again until Wednesday. If a kid can't do that, then you could change it by changing the shape, the color, all these things that we just talked about. Let's dive into textures. So there are a bunch of different textures that require different skills to eating. So purees, thinking of our yogurts or baby foods, those are really easy to eat. A hard munchable would be like a dried mango, excuse me, or a beef stick. And these are essentially thinking of, okay, if you gave it to a baby, could they take a bite out of it, or would they just like gum it and gnaw it? So things that are kind of hard to take a bite, but you can munch it and they're hard. A meltable would be like a Cheeto puff or a graham cracker, anything that you like take a bite and when your saliva hits it, it kind of dissolves it. So like goldfish crackers, they're crunchy, but then when you get to chewing it, it kind of just turns into mush. A soft cube, thinking of like cheese or bananas, they're soft. Soft mechanicals, there's single textures and there's mixed textures. A single texture would be like rice. It requires more oral mechanics to eat it, but you're not managing multiple textures at the same time. A soft mechanical mixed texture could be like a chicken nugget because it has a breading and the inside, and your brain has to interpret two different textures at the same time. A hard mechanical would be like a steak or a raw carrot or like an apple. So some foods are easier to eat than others, and some foods require a lot of skills to navigate. So thinking about like that chicken noodle soup that we talked about a few slides ago, that's something that's really hard to navigate. So if you're asking a kiddo that hasn't really done that before, they don't have a lot of practice, it's going to be anxiety provoking because they don't know how to manage that. There's just like, wow, this is a lot of things in here. I don't know what to do. So it goes beyond just the flavor. Sometimes too, you can think of, okay, my kid isn't eating fruits, right? They're not eating, or carrots. They don't eat apples or carrots. It's too hard. It might be too much to chew. My jaw gets tired when I eat carrots. But instead of thinking, oh, they don't eat any fruits or anything like that, can we change the texture? Can we maybe get dehydrated apples, like apple chips? So, because it has similar nutrition, and then now it's a meltable texture, so it's not as hard. So, playing around with that, food doesn't always just have to be in the one way. And if we already have difficulties with motor planning and sensory processing, these textures are going to be really important to tune into. There's a link down here underneath these images of the foods, and this just dives into examples of every single one of these textures listed here. So you could get more information of like, oh, this is this texture, this is that texture, if you want to play around with that a little bit. What I really like to educate parents on is Ellen Sater's division of responsibility. So when there are meal times, everybody has their own role. The parents decide what, when, and where the child eats, and the child decides how much and whether they want to eat. So it's taking the pressure off a little bit of parents on, is my kid getting enough nutrition? Are they going to eat it? I got to force them to do it. Here's the mealtime. This is what I expect. A child, even as young as like 1 through 5, their bodies kind of already know how much they want to eat. They kind of can decide what's good for them internally sometimes, not every kiddo, but we kind of have to trust the kid a little bit. If they don't want to eat it, we can't force it because that's not our responsibility. We can decide what, when, and where they're going to eat, but if they choose not to do it, that's kind of their choice as well. And I want to mention this because thinking of, okay, if I'm a parent or the therapist and I am pressuring my child into eating, a lot of kids with autism, they're going to refuse the demand. They're going to say, no, 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 even if they want to eat it, because you're forcing me to. So by opening this up and giving them a new role and reframing what our mind is of feeding, we kind of give them their power back. And our responsibility is to serve them different things, to create an environment where they're wanting to try. For more information, you could check out her website. But it's just a good idea to like, okay, as a parent, it's not my decision of how much is going into the body and whether they're going to eat it. That is up to the child. Okay, let's get into some nutrition. I got these pictures from MJ and Hungry Man. She's a registered dietitian and a mom of two. The numbers and the circles indicate how many servings daily that is recommended. I am not someone that's like, you have to eat this amount of nutrition day to day. I really like to zoom out and think of, are they meeting it within the week? Our bodies fluctuate. Some days I'm hungry and some days I'm not. Some days my body's like, I need protein, and other days it's like fruits and vegetables. So zooming it out into like a weekly lens, are they meeting this sort of need? Also, do you see how many different ways we can achieve protein? It doesn't just have to be a specific like meat or whatever. There are so many different ways to get it. And even if your kid right now is only drinking Pediasure, and that's where they are right now, that's just where we're going to start. They're meeting their nutritional needs that way too. Giving ourselves grace of like, okay, there's so many varieties. We're working on it. This is a skill that is learned and we're just not there yet. It doesn't mean that we'll never get there. It's just where we are in this exact moment is not there quite yet because it can be scary. Like there's so many different textures, so many different flavors, what's going on. They're still learning how to process the environment. And to do it in your mouth and do it up to 11 times a day can be really, really scary. I'm going to turn our attention to fruits and vegetables. Like I mentioned earlier, everything is very different when you eat a fruit and vegetable. Even like 2 carrots don't have the same crunch usually, or like the banana. If I ate a banana today and the same bunch tomorrow, they're going to be different ripenesses. So if we honor that and thinking of, could we get nutrition through applesauce instead? Could we get nutrition like, because that would be a puree? Can we eat fruit, frozen fruit? Could we eat dry fruit, dehydrated fruit? It doesn't just have to be in its rawest form. Also, too, if this is for nutrition and your child is not there yet, I always recommend a multivitamin, right? A multivitamin can meet some of these needs if we're not there yet. It's a goal, it's a work in progress. We're learning healthy eating. It may not be like this forever. So we'll move on to dairy and grains. There's just so many different ways that we can get it. It doesn't have to be just what we're told. If we could get dairy through Ensure, we can get grains through cereals too. A lot of Kellogg's cereals and Post cereals are fortified with vitamins and minerals. So there's nutrients that way too. There's so many ways to get nutrients. And if we zoom out in the weekly lens, it could be helpful of reducing some stress. We also need to recognize some cultural and societal views that really impact feeding and our view of feeding. At least in America, there's that view of thinness. And if a body is genetically a little bit heavier, just because that's how they're built, and they're only eating mac and cheese, there's some judgment around that. So we have to really challenge that of, okay, everybody's body is a little bit different, and do we really value thinness? If my kid is eating and that's my goal for him is to just eat, that's our win right there. We also have to look on our views of healthy. A lot of people are pushing for non-processed foods of you have to eat a variety. You have to eat meat and beans and all these things to hit your protein goals or whatever. But if your child is eating chicken nuggets and they can eat two different brands of chicken nuggets and we're not worried about them losing it, they're meeting their protein. So, where is this view of you need to eat such a variety to be healthy? Right now, if your kid is just doing it, we got to celebrate that too. We also have to look at how accessible is food. Can you get to the grocery store? Can you buy fresh things? Do you have availability to even try them? And if the answer is no, that's okay. Not yet. We have to also look at the views of playing with food. A lot of cultures are like, when you're at the table, you're not going to play with it. But when we're 5 and under, playing is how we experience the world. That is how we get so much sensory information, playing with our hands, playing and pretending. That is where a kid's motivation usually is at this age. If we're going to follow their motivation, we kind of have to play to explore, to get familiar with it. Um, so it doesn't always have to be at meal times. It could be like a structured time. This is where we play. This is when we're going to play with it. But thinking of it as I'm exploring. And usually, what happens sometimes when kids explore and they're mashing with their hands and there is no pressure to eat, they kind of go. And what happens? We also look at food preferences. Everybody has their food preferences. I have my own food preferences. I have textures that I do not like. Kids can have their own preferences too. So to expect them to eat everything is not going to be beneficial to anybody. There's the view of spitting out food. A lot of people might think it's rude. I encourage families and kids to work on spitting out food because it kind of takes away that black and white thinking of, well, if I try it, then I have to swallow it, right? But if we really don't like it in our mouth and we really can't tolerate it, it kind of takes that pressure away of I need to swallow it and complete the whole cycle. It kind of gives them an out if they're really not ready to complete the last step of swallowing it, which is a hard skill to do. So if it's just like I really just want to take a bite and see how it feels, and if I'm not ready, I can spit it out. If the culture doesn't like that, or like societally I don't want to do that, we could teach them how to do it respectfully. How do you do it in a napkin? It really gives autonomy versus, okay, if I take the bite, I have to swallow it. I have to do this. And then thinking of what are healthy relationships rather than complying. We want them to try. We don't want them to just eat everything that's served to them because I worry about masking. If we're forcing kids to eat or we're giving them rigid routines and rules about food and they just have to feel like they need to fit in. A lot of the times there's a connection between autism and eating disorders later on in life because this is what they're told. This is how I view food. It's this way or that way. And I'm just masking and I really don't like this. So I really focus on a willingness to try. How do I regulate myself when I'm anxious compared to eating everything? So here are just some simple therapy tips that I use. I always serve at least one preferred food at all times. any food is better than no food. And I'll say that again. Any food is better than no food. So no shame if you have to serve your kid the same thing over and over again, making small changes. We want them to eat. We also want to make it a low pressure environment through play, through not forcing, no bribery, no, if you eat this, then this happens. Or if you don't finish your meal, I'm taking 15 minutes away of TV time. That really adds stress to eating. And if we know when we're stressed, we kind of don't want to eat. So physiologically, we kind of have to make it a low pressure environment to reduce that stress. We're going to follow your kids' motivation. If they're really into a certain texture right now, um, play around with that. If they really like to play with it, go with that. If your kid's only drinking Pediasure, can we play around with that and like try a different flavor, try a different kind of beverage, or even like a different bottle cup. We're going to follow their motivation and where they are right now and think of it. What are their strengths? What can we use and how do we build upon their strengths right now so it doesn't feel like we're trying to change them and get them to do something they don't like? We're going to make it playful. I love the example of like blowing through a veggie straw and it like makes a whistle, or putting two french fries or pretzels and being a whale. A lot of the time, I mean, a walrus, a lot of the time they'll try to imitate you. And then it's already in their mouth. And that's a step in itself too. We're going to use language as a tool. I really refrain from using yucky and yummy. I don't like to have those kind of descriptors on foods because then we're kind of in that black and white thinking again. I really like to think of the sensory properties. This food is very crunchy. This food is soft. Is yours crunchier than mine? Who can make the loudest one? Ooh, this is red. Ooh, just like describing it as much as you can. Not only does this change the language, but it also gives the kid more information. Say the person next to me is like, oh, these crickets are very crunchy. They have a nutty flavor. It actually pairs really well with the avocado. I'm more likely to eat it because I know exactly what to expect. So when we let them know and we're describing it, it kind of can reduce some of that anxiety. I highly, highly recommend serving foods out of the packaging when possible. So like taking the granola bar out of the wrapper, putting goldfish into a bowl. This is important because a lot of kids will get fixated on the packaging. And so if a holiday edition comes out or there's a change in the packaging, they may reject it right away because it visually looks different on the package. We don't want them to fixate on the package because that's not the food. That's just the media and the marketing. So if you take it out, put it on a plate, that's more realistic and hopefully they don't get fixated on that. I also try to create realistic expectations. And as a feeding therapist, when I make goals, it's usually adding 1 to 2 new foods within 6 months. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a lifelong journey. So really letting families know it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. It can take those 10 exposures to decide if we like it or not. And if our expectation is just to get more familiar and be willing to tolerate something on the plate, something that's new, that's a win in itself too. I look to teach kids skills of looking, touching, smelling, licking, biting, and kissing, because those are steps of how we explore versus just having to eat it and swallow. If I can look at it, I tolerate the visual change. Touching it, I could kind of feel how the texture is. Smelling is smelling. We get kind of how it's going to taste with the smell. We can lick it. And back to that realistic expectation, if your kid only licks a new food, that is a win. He is willing to try and lick it. That's exposure. That is great. We're going to celebrate that. So it's the end goal is usually not just they're going to eat 5, 10 new foods. It's okay. If I give them a new food, are they willing to even just interact with it? And then we really, really, really need to repeat those exposures. If they eat it one time and they say, huh, I don't like it, we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep giving those exposures. The 10 times is a good rule of thumb. With an autistic kid, it could be up to 100. So patience. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Okay, I only have a few more slides and then I'm open for questions. Things that we can do to make it fun at home is providing a visual choice board. What do you want to eat today? And then they have more say in that. You could play with the food. You could do fake food. I've played board games where if you look at it, you get 1 point. If you touch it, you get 2 and you get to move on. You can make it fun. I have used spinner plates where you like spin it and it tells you, oh, what should we do with this one as exposures? I guess who play, I didn't know how else to describe it, where it's like a lot of different containers and you hit it and it like pops open. So you don't know what you're seeing until you open it. Sensory playing with food like beans, rice, bananas, reading books about food, watching videos about food. If you could always recommend going to the library. The Very Hungry Caterpillar is also available in Spanish. There are videos on YouTube that someone reads it out loud. I know that there's a Spanish version on YouTube of the Very Hungry Caterpillar too. Involving your child in cooking, letting them stir the eggs, letting them pour their own milk. We don't really get exposures unless we're interacting, and cooking is a great way. Letting them watch you. Modeling trying. So you as an adult, you're going to model trying something, pretend that it's new, describe what it is. This is how I would try it. And if I don't like it, here are the things that I can do. Giving them different options. And when our kids are little, they learn through watching other people most of the time. So you are your biggest tool. And sometimes I'll use a mirror. A lot of kids like to watch themselves eat and it keeps them focused and they kind of see how their mouth moves. You kind of just have to play around with it and find out what's the strengths, what's working, what doesn't work, kind of avoid the things that kind of don't work right now, and keep the mentality that it's a marathon. So let's talk a little bit about variety. I picked 2 examples here, cheese and fruit. There are so many different types of cheeses out there, and there are so many different types of fruit out there. So much variety. So right now, if your kid eats cheese, can you play with the variety? Can you, like, if that's their strength, they love cheese, can we try new variety of cheeses? Can we experience new fruits? If your kid's not eating raw fruits yet, can we do dehydrated fruits? And exposing to variety is really important. I'm going to share a little story, or I'll save it for later. But let's talk about variety. Just because we have one experience with it doesn't mean like the next cheese is going to be the same. So you kind of have to play around with that variety, see and follow those routes of strengths. Other areas to address are rapport, which is essentially connection. If you don't have connection and you don't have rapport, it's going to be hard to be able to address this skill. They're probably just going to resist it if you're not if you don't have connection. Other areas could be like remaining calm and regulated when new foods are around, addressing our fight or flight system through co-regulation. And co-regulation is essentially you as an adult helping calm down through the use of your own body and like taking deep breaths, not escalating when they're escalating. You are using your body to help calm them down. I don't expect kids to be able to regulate themselves until around 7 years old if they're neurotypical. and even later if they have a diagnosis of autism. That's pretty late. They need our help as adults to help them regulate. So if they're heightened, getting heightened back is not going to be really helpful. We really have to address their anxieties around food, which is probably happening, and help calm them down. Hey, it's okay. Giving that no pressure environment, and really making sure that our bodies are calm, because we can't learn if our bodies aren't calm. And if we're crying, screaming, all of that, we can't learn. We also need to work on transitions, getting to the table, getting away from the table. Transitions are going to be hard in general. So if eating is non-preferred, can we also work on transitions so it doesn't escalate when we just say it's dinner? And then the trifecta of problem solving for Black and white thinking and working on flexibility. So we are near the end. This is a case study. I would love for you guys to put these in the chat or say your responses, whatever's easier. But Leonardo is an autistic 4-year-old boy who splits custody between his parents' houses. Leonardo is described as a picky eater who eats blueberries, toast, pancakes, dino nuggets, oatmeal, and pasta with butter. His parents report that Leonardo will refuse to eat anything new. He gags when his parents prompt him to take a bite and try it. Leonardo still drinks from a baby bottle. His mom reports that Leonardo could take up to 1 hour to eat and will just sit in his high chair. Leonardo watches TV when his parents are cooking, and he refuses to transition to the table. Mom's goal is to make meal times less stressful. So what other information would you want to know based off of what we learned today? I could open the chat myself too. Let's see. Maybe I can't. I cannot open the chat. So if someone can mediate this, that would be great.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I will.
What information would you want to know?
So for those of you out there, I'm sure you've encountered similar situations with either a child you've worked with or your own child who may have difficulty transitioning during mealtime, or transitioning from a bottle, or refusing to try new foods. Given this situation, what would you want to know in order to, or how would one of the food chaining examples shown in this presentation given, what would you recommend?
Yeah.
Or, which one of these bullets would you
Yeah. We'll give it another
respond to?
few
Yeah, we
more
could give it a couple
seconds, and
minutes.
I'll go
I
ahead and
have some
answer.
ideas.
Yeah, yeah. Some of the information that I would want to know is like, what is the most successful mealtime? Oh, now I can see the chat. Let's see. Oh, who is eating at the table? What foods does he eat at each household? Exactly. Those are great
That's
questions
great.
to ask.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Cynthia. Oh, and Pin just submitted a question or a suggestion.
Yeah, maybe instead of watching TV, they could try to turn that off and let him play with the toy he really enjoys. I like that too. And a strategy could be even letting him bring that toy to the table to help the transition to keep him calm. Because it's definitely, if he's having a hard time eating and going from something we really like to something we don't like, I can anticipate a lot of crying. I'm also wanting to know what kind of pasta shapes? Is it just one pasta? How do they do oatmeal? Does he eat frozen blueberries? What is the custody like? Is it weekly? Is it every other day? What is it really like? What kind of prompts does he need to eat? Is mom like, eat, 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 take a bite? And that I'm also going to look for, is he turning red when he's eating? Have we offered different bottles? Can he drink from a straw? There's so many different skills. And sometimes parents could focus on like, this is what my child can't do yet. And we kind of forget what can they do. One strategy I would use to reduce anxiety around meal times would be to make it playful. That's the biggest one. Don't pressure them to eat. Um, and then a food chain, let's do toast. So I would want to know exactly what kind of toast. And then I might try different or like the same brand, but it like maybe if he was only eating wheat toast, could he eat one with seeds on the top? Could he even eat one taking the seeds off? Does he do it with butter? Could we add jam? Could we eventually make a sandwich? All of that. Okay. And then I'll it looks like there's a lot of questions, so we won't do any stories. But in conclusion, every child is unique. There is no one right way to eat. Any food is better than no food. We're going to acknowledge that feeding can be hard for your kid and it could be a sensory experience. So we have to acknowledge that if it's hard, we kind of have to reduce the anxiety around that too. We all have preferences, even as adults. Feeding is so sensory. So we kind of have to break down foods into their sensory components. We need to look at what is my child eating right now? What strengths do they have? What is their motivation right now? Are they even motivated to try anything new? And when we're younger than 5, our motivation is really internal of just ourselves and to be independent. When they get kind of older, their motivation changes. When they go to school and they start having friends or peers coming by and birthday parties, motivation for feeding changes drastically. So if you could get anything into your kid right now and they're 5 or under, good job, anything. It's hard. And then as they age, we could play with those motivations. And then advocacy of letting people know, like, well, he's eating. That's my job, and I'm doing a great job. Or this is his sensory needs. This is what he really likes. This is where we are right now, and we're working on it. Um, Letting people know that it's okay. Like feeding doesn't always have to look one specific way because we're all different. We got to look at the child holistically, which essentially means everything, all the context, everything, not just what are they eating and what are they not eating. And then create a no pressure environment because it is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're not going to make a lot of progress really fast. It takes a long time and it's a journey. And that is all that I have for you guys today. And I would love to answer some questions I went a little over in the last 15 minutes that we have.